search for a source for Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds that alav she'ein bo maaseh, someone violates the Torah, says don't do something, they would get malkut, even though they violated without doing an action. And the Gemara wants to know, where is the source for Rabbi Yehuda? Where does he get this from, that alav she'ein bo maaseh would get lashes? Good morning, Dr. Navid.
Oh.
Good morning, Yosef Atzadik.
Morning, Rabbi.
So that's what the Gemara is in search of a source for Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah. So for Rabbi Yehuda said that Notar teaches us that first Notar tells us that there's no malkut on Notar. Meaning Rabbi Yehuda says there should have been malkut because you violated the Torah, but the Torah says don't leave over the Korban Pesach until the morning. So by leaving over the Korban Pesach until the morning, there should been, you violated a lo saseh. But the Torah, by the fact that the Torah tells you that you burned it in the morning, so therefore there's no malkut. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. There's no malkut in the specific case of Notar. Why? Because the Torah tells us that the tikkun, the way to fix up the problem is to burn. Even if fix it, even if fix it, it's still he has the ability to fix it, and it should not carry malkut. And we said last time, let's say if he didn't burn it and somehow it got lost in some other fashion, so we said that we have to look into it. But the way from Rashi's explanation that the tikkun is burning it. Malkut is not the tikkun. So then the morning, Mr. Haber. So the Gemara, Mr. Haber, this chair is here to make sure no one falls over the wire. See this chair right here in front of me? Yeah. We don't want anyone falling over the wire. We have to do something, or else to ensure that no one falls. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda would have said, if we would not have the pasuk telling us that you burned the nota, what would you have concluded? You would have concluded that there should be malkut for leaving it overnight. So the Gemara says, even though you didn't do an action, you were passive. But the Gemara wants to say that seems to indicate that Rabbi Yehuda would hold by being passive, but you violated when the Torah says don't do, that would carry with malkut. That's the chidush that Rabbi Yehuda would hold that way. And the Gemara is seeking a source for Rabbi Yehuda. Where does Rabbi Yehuda know this law? Where does he know? How does he know that alav she'ein bo maaseh, violating the Torah without an action, would carry with it lashes? We said the case of the Torah, when the Torah talks about lashes, it talks about lashes connecting with a violation that was done through an action. Right? We said the Torah gives lashes near the pasuk of don't muzzle the ox when it's threshing. So that's doing an action. You muzzle the animal. So if that's the case that the Torah connects to lashes, so we should have said that everything should be similar to that case. And Rabbi Yehuda says the chidush, the novel idea that even non-action also carries with it lashes. So the Gemara wants to know where does he get that from? That's what the Gemara was in search of a source for Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara, we're up to the part of the Gemara where Reish Lakish said that he found his source. We're on Dalet Amud Beis 4b. Reish Lakish says he found his source from Edim Zomimim. Edim Zomimim, the witness who framed somebody, they sin through speech, non-action, and they get lashes. So too, we'll learn out all over. There'll be lashes by sinning, by transgressing ilos saseh. The Torah says don't do something, even when the item does not have lashes. That would be that's the case of the Torah to teach us all over. Dr. Navid, you with Claire? The Gemara is looking for a case. The Gemara is looking for a source for Rabbi Yehuda's law. What's the law? The law is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. It's not our opinion. It's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. It's not the Rabbanon's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda's law is if a person violates and the Torah says, don't do something, don't do it. And you violated it and you did what the Torah says don't do, even though you did it not by what action, you did it by just being passive, or you did it through speech, there will also be lashes for such a violation. Without a master. That's Rabbi Yehuda's contribution to the world, in his opinion. Mr. Habe, is that clear? So here, at this point, he's saying, in general, it'd be one punishment. But now we're focusing on the punishment of lashes. He's agreeing with one punishment, right? That's what we're saying at this point. There might be an exception to the rule. We find the Torah does say that Moti Shemra gets 2 punishments, but that's not the norm according to the Rabbanan. But that's just an exception to the rule. But where is Rabbi Yehuda's source that violating a lo saseh without an action gets malkut? It gets lashes. That's what the Gemara is in search of a source. So the Gemara thought that we found a good source, Edom Zomimim. Edom Zomimim, they violated through speech, which the Gemara does not classify as action. And therefore, and yet it carries with it lashes, like we gave the case. Let's say we gave the case of Ben Gerusha, Ben Talutza. The Torah, if a guy comes in and he frames the Kohen, and we say we do to the witnesses, we give them lashes. We don't make them, we don't consider them a invalid Kohen. What do we do to them if they framed the guy and they wanted to ruin him? We give them lashes. We give them lashes for violating this, by doing violating a lo saseh through speech. So too, anytime a person will violate a lo saseh through speech, he should get, or passive, he should get lashes. That's what the Gemara wants to use Edom Zomim as the precedent. Then the Gemara shot back. You can't use Edom Zomim. Why can't you use Edom Zomim? Edom Zomim is a unique situation. The Torah is extra strict by Edom Zomim. Morning, Morris. Extra strict by Edom Zomim, which we don't find other places. Where is the Torah extra strict Edom Zomim? That Edom Zomim do not require a warning. The norm, to get lashes, you need a warning beforehand. These witnesses don't require a warning. So therefore, you can't use this as a role model to say, we're going to learn from Edom Zomim. This Edom Zomim is going to be the teacher. It's going to be the teacher for all over, because it's not the normal teacher. It's a teacher that has extra, the Torah was extra strict by this case, unusually strict. So maybe the same way the Torah was unusually strict that it doesn't require a warning, maybe that's why the Torah is unusually strict that it gives lashes even without an action. But in other cases where the general rule is they need warning in order to get lashes. So maybe the only way the guy will get lashes when he gets warned is only if he does an action. That's what the Gemara wants to say, that Edom Zomimim, maybe the Torah was more strict there than other places, and therefore you can't use that as an example, as a source, because it's, it's like, the rabbi, what did I say? New characteristic. Like, the rabbi acted in a certain way. Wow, he fasted for 5 days in a row. Okay, that's the rabbi. It's not indicative that everybody should fast 5 days in a row. He's this holy, let's say he was a holy rabbi. He was a holy rabbi. So you can't learn from Edom Zomim. So the Gemara shoots back to that you want to tell me about this unique characteristic, stringency of Edom Zomimim, that it does not need a warning, and you want to say maybe that's why the Torah was extra strict regarding lashes by violating this prohibition without an action, because it was very strict regarding warning, didn't require warning. I'm going to show you that it's not the warning that is whether you have the unique characteristic of not needing a warning is the reason why the Torah is extra strict regarding lashes on a violation without an action. Because I have another case, Motzi Shemra. What's the case of Motzi Shemra? The husband defamed the character, the reputation of his wife, right? And that man needs a warning. And he gets lashes, but how does he get lashes? He gets lashes for what? What was his violation? What did he do wrong? Speech. He also didn't do an action. And is the reason why the Torah goes ahead and gives him lashes is because the Torah was extra strict that it didn't require warning? No, it requires a warning there. So since it requires a warning there, and yet the Torah says that he gets lashes with violation without an action, shows you it's not the unique characteristic that it does something that the only time you're going to give lashes for violation without an action is only when the Torah was so strict that it doesn't require warning. Because here the Torah requires a warning, and it gets lashes for violation without an action. So too, we should be able to learn everything else in the Torah. So you can't show it. Don't tell me it's this characteristic trait of stringency that it doesn't require warning by Edom Zomimim. That's why it gets lashes. Because I have other things, something else that does require warning, doesn't have that stringency, and yet gets lashes for violation with speech. So it would seem that the stringency of not requiring a warning is not the reason why it gets lashes. Because if you tell me that's the reason why it gets lashes, because it doesn't require a warning, because the Torah was so strict, I have something else where the Torah was not so strict and still gives lashes. So it's not, you're going to tell me it's because of this stringency, we have that, because of A, we have B. Because it doesn't require a warning here, that's why you get lashes without an action. I'll show you something else that does require a warning, so it doesn't have that stringency and still gets lashes. Is that clear? So that's what the Gemara says. So the Gemara says, and therefore, what does the Gemara mean to say? The Gemara means to say that it's not the stringency of not needing a warning that's causing the lashes. Got that? Because if it's not, because I have something else that does need a warning, it still gets lashes without an action. So the Gemara wanted to say that then you're going to ask me, then you're going to say, hey, you can't prove, you want to use Moshe Shemra, the husband defaming his wife, as a proof to show me that you get lashes without an action, but you can't prove from that case because it also has a unique stringency. What's the unique stringency? That we give two punishments by the husband defaming the wife. So maybe because we give two punishments, which is not the norm, maybe that's why it gets lashes without an action. But how could you learn out other cases in the Torah where the Torah wasn't as strict that you'll get lashes for violation of something without an action? Then the Gemara is going to show you. Then the Gemara is going to shoot back. I'll show you. Edom Zomimim. So what the Gemara is going to be doing, is saying, I have two cases. That each one has its own stringency. It's unique stringency the Torah has in each case. But what's the common denominator? The common denominator is that they both are violations without an action, and they violate without an action, and they get lashes. So too, we're going to learn out everything in the Torah from those two. We're going to use those two as some. You can't learn out from one. Each one by itself, you can't learn out from, because you can say each one has a unique stringency. But once you have both of them together, so let's learn out from the challenge of both of them to teach everything else. Because if you're going to tell me it's the stringency that causes the law, the other one doesn't have the stringency and still has the same law. That's what the Gemara said. So then the Gemara said, when we got up to last week, we're 4 lines into the wide lines of the Gemara. You have it, Dr. Navid? Morris? 4 lines in the wide lines on Dalet on base 4b. Mr. Haber, you have it? Daniel, you have it? The Gemara says that these two cases have a common denominator that the other cases don't have. And because the other cases don't have, therefore you can't use these two together to teach everything else. What's the common denominator? These two cases have within it the concept of a fine, of a knas. the Torah gave some sort of fine. These penalties, a guy goes ahead and eats pork. Okay, you ate pork. Person ate pork. Chas v'shalom. So he ate not kosher. So the repercussions, the ramifications, eating not kosher, the punishment is he gets lashes. Okay, that's the crime you did, and comes with the punishment of lashes. A person who kills somebody, the punishment is death. But here, the Torah gives a punishment here, which let's give an example. The guy ate his own mim. They attempted to cause a loss of money to someone. They attempted to give lashes to someone. They wanted to frame somebody on something that carries with it lashes. But they weren't successful. It didn't go through. They attempted to cause the guy lashes. And the court never gave the guy lashes based on the testimony. And the Torah says you got to give those witnesses lashes. Because they had the intention. Now that's something, that's a very great novel idea. That you give somebody a punishment for not actually causing an actual hurt to someone else, just for attempting to hurt somebody else.
You also give reward.
What's that?
You also give
You give, that's true. You give reward also. So therefore, that's a unique thing that happens by Adam's own mim. So that we see the Torah was unusually strict by Adam's own mim, which we don't find in general. Also, the Torah by a guy who defames his wife. He didn't cause an actual loss to his wife. He gave her, he made up a rumor about his wife. And the Torah says you got to pay for that. You got to pay. You got to pay a payment for merely for not without physically damaging somebody, but by saying something about somebody, a false rumor. So we find the Torah is very strict by these two cases. So therefore, because they have that common denominator of kanas, of a penalty, so maybe that's why the Torah is also strict regarding lashes.
penalty doesn't mean monetary.
Right, here we're talking about here we're talking about this penalty doesn't necessarily mean monetarily, correct? But the idea, but a fine. A fine, kanas means a fine and a penalty. When I say fine and penalty, I'm referring to the same thing. A fine meaning something that's not based on a loss, on a financial loss. It's not. I mean, like I gave the example, double parking. Double parking, you didn't cause a $115 loss, but they give you a fine. If double park on a street, no cars are coming. You didn't cause a loss of business of $115 in the city of New York. You actually didn't cause a loss of $115, but they give you a fine. You blow your horn at a certain time of the day, we can give you a fine, even though you didn't cause a certain loss.
Yeah, but
There's a fine, right? The monetary payment is called there. It's called the fine. Correct.
Okay, but when we're
The end is someone. But that particular right. In that particular case, right. But there's lashes, right? But that lash is also what's called a fine. Why? Because what did the witnesses do? The witnesses wanted to ruin a guy from being a Kohen. They were not successful. They attempted, and they're gonna get whipped for it. They're gonna get hit for it. That's also a fine for bad intentions. So we see. So maybe that's why perhaps the Torah was so strict by these two cases that they have within it this payment called knas, or this not payment, you don't call it payment, this punishment called knas. So maybe if they have this punishment called knas, maybe that's why the Torah is very strict, that even mere speech, not being active. I understand the comment, they're both lashes, but the question is, why is it that there's lashes by both cases? What is it because it's like the run of the mill? Good morning, Akiva. Is it because it's the normal type of case of violating the Torah? It's like any other case where you violated the law, said don't do something, and you violate it. It's like any normal case. Or are these cases outstanding? All right, better words, exceptional cases, unusual cases. Are they unusual? If you could show me there's something unusual about these cases, I can't use this as a prototype for the usual run-of-the-mill case. And that's what the Gemara wants to say. The Gemara wants to say that these are there's unusual punishments here that are going on in these cases that you can't use for other cases. So therefore, like the case, like if the Torah, let's say we gave an example, a guy went ahead and he left overnight nota. He left overnight the Karban Pesach. It's not an unusual case. And now the Torah says, now the question is, would he get lashes? If the Torah would not have given us the rule of burning it in the morning, would he get lashes without the Torah telling us the fix is burning it in the morning? So Rabbi Huda, he said he would get lashes. So the Gemara says, you were inactive. How do you know you're going to get lashes for being inactive? You would have gotten it. You want to tell me, I found by Eidim Zomim and Motzi Shemra that they get lashes by being inactive here also. So I'll tell you, those cases, the Torah didn't treat them like the normal things. The Torah gave fines in those cases. So in those cases, the Torah gave a fine. So therefore, maybe they're not the normal rule. Maybe that's why the Torah also gave lashes for violating it without being active. But in this case where I left it overnight, it's not a case where the Torah was extra strict about a fine. Torah didn't give me any fine in this particular case. The Torah just says you can't do this. And there's no fine that we find the Torah is imposing a fine over here. And yet, so how do you know that this case would have gotten lashes? So that's what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara says 4 lines in the 1 line. Those cases are a knas. Those cases are unusual cases, and therefore you can't use them to teach other cases. So the Gemara says, "Halo kasha, Rabbi Yehuda lo savala Rabbi Akiva." Rabbi Yehuda does not agree with Rabbi Akiva. If you recall, it was Rabbi Akiva that said to identify Eidim Zomimim as a knas. That was Rabbi Akiva's understanding. But other opinion holds that Eidim Zomimim is not a knas. What does that mean? That the general rule of Eidim Zomimim is when you attempted to cause a certain loss to somebody, that's considered, and now the Torah says you got to get punished, that punishment that you wanted to cause him. That's not it's not considered like it's a penalty. It's like we look at it like you did that loss to that person and you're deserving of that punishment. It's not, when you say a guy defames his wife, that's called a knas. You're punishing a guy. You're giving him a financial payment for the saying words about his wife, causing her. That's not that we look at that as a knas, as a penalty. But when you come to court and you want to cause a loss of money to someone, you want to cause someone to get lashes, you want to hurt that person, and we're gonna impose a penalty for you. Do to them what they wanted to do to the other guy. We say you have to do exactly, the general rule is you do to them exactly what they want to do to the other guy. So that means we're treating the other guy's attempt, we're looking at his attempt like, we look at it like your attempt is as if you did it. And we don't consider that as a knas, as a fine. We can consider that, we look at it like as a monetary, as a payment, because we look at the attempt as if it was done. So that's, if we would give you an arbitrary number that the Eidim Zom would have to pay, then it's a fine. Tell me, all people who frame someone have to pay $1,000. That's a fine. All people who double park have to pay $115. But the fact that the Eidim Zom are paying exactly what they wanted to do to the other guy, that's the punishment for framing somebody, and it's not looked at like a fine. And therefore, since it's not looked at as a fine, So they don't have the common denominator. These two cases, Adam Zomim and husband framing his wife, don't have a common denominator of knas, according to Rabbi Yehuda. They're not both cases of penalty. Therefore, you can't say that you both stick out and they're unique, and they can't serve as a role model for everyone else, because they are both of them together don't have something that everyone else doesn't have. And since they don't have something that everyone else doesn't have, I would be able to learn. It could be used as a teacher for everything else. So that's what the Gemara says. So the Gemara says, the Gemara is saying, if I could show you these, what Rabbi Akiva says, that he identifies Adam Zomim as a knas, as a penalty, as a fine. That's how he identifies it. If you identify Adam Zomim as a knas, so then, and we know with the husband defaming his wife, that $100 penalty is also a knas. That $100, what? So then they have a common denominator, and therefore they can't be used as the teachers for everything else, because they're unusual. They're not the norm. They have a common denominator. I mean, if I want to use them as a source for a case that's no knas, so I want to use them as a source for a case that doesn't have this aspect of knas, I can't. The case of, let's say, the guy left it overnight. There's no issue of knas over there. There's no, and I want to use that as a source. That the same way these two guys get lashes without a warning, I would have given these guys, the guy left over the same way these two guys get lashes without doing an action. I would have obligated the guy who left over the no-show overnight. I would have obligated him lashes without doing an action. I would have used these two guys as role models. You can't use these guys as role models. These guys are exceptional cases, not going with the normal rules of the Torah. It's not the normal case. It's not the normal case. You can't apply a case where the Torah was extra strict to someone to a regular case. So since over there the Torah gave this new chidush, this new concept of knas, penalty, fine. So therefore maybe that's why the Torah threw the book and said even without an action. But in a case where there's no aspect of fine, maybe you need to do an action in order to get lashes. You see it? The Gemara is saying that if we have two cases, if they're not if they don't have a common denominator, so then the common denominator is the bottom. If there's no common denominator of astringency that they both have, so then you're able to use them as role models for everything else. If they both have astringency that others don't have, I can't use them. So Rabbi Akiva, the question, Rabbi Akiva holds that Adam Zomim are classified as a knas, as a penalty. According to Rabbi Akiva's understanding, if you classify Adam Zomim as a penalty, so then you can't use Adam Zomim as a source to teach other things that are not a penalty, because they don't have that strength, they don't have that stringency as Adam Zomim. So you can't use a case where the Torah was extra strict, when the Torah showed an extra strictness, one extra strictness, so maybe that's why the Torah showed us a second extra strictness. It gave a strictness of knas, a fine, so maybe that's why it gave a strictness of punishing with lashes without a warning, without an action. But you want to use, but so therefore that's maybe an exception to the rule. It can't be. The key is we're looking for a source to teach all over in the Torah when a person violates, it says don't do something, and you did not follow, and you violated it, and you did not do an action, they'll get lashes. And you want to use Adam Zomim as a source. Okay.
I think my question is what the issue is here is it the definition of Rabbi Yehuda and Akiva for knas? Do they disagree on the definition of knas?
They did very good. They disagree on what is Adam Zomim. That's the question. How to identify Adam Zomim? So once we identify, we clarify how we look at Adam Zomim, would indicate to us if we have But it will indicate to us, can Edom Zoman be a source for this question or not, for this issue? Meaning, we're trying to figure out, where do we know for Rabbi Yehuda that if you violate a lo saseh without an action, there's lashes? That's what he says. Now he needs to find a source for that. He needs to know, where does he get that from? Right? Is that what the Gemara wanted to know? And the Gemara wants to say, you know where he got it from? The Gemara says, first the Gemara said, what did he say? Motzi Shemra.
And that was
And then the Gemara knocked it out. Because maybe Motzi Shemra is different. But the Torah is extra strict by Motzi Shemra. Gives two punishments there. You can't use it as a source for him everywhere else. Then the Gemara says, okay, let's go from Edom Zoman. Edom Zoman seems like a nice case. Does not do an action, and they get lashes without an action. So too everywhere else. Right? Is that what the Gemara tried to do? And the Gemara is that what the Gemara tried to do? Edom Zoman? And then what did the Gemara do to that? The Gemara says you can't use Edom Zoman because Edom Zoman has some sort of stringency that's not found by other cases. And maybe because it has that stringency, maybe that's why it had lashes without an action. Maybe it's the exception to the rule. Because it has another stringency. Maybe because we see it has another stringency, maybe that's why it has that stringency. The stringency of Edom Zoman is they don't require a warning. So therefore, the Torah is showing you that Edom Zoman is not the norm. So you're gonna prove for me from not the norm for the norm. If not, the fact that it gets lashes, maybe because it's getting lashes for speech, is because it's not the normal case. The Torah shows us that we treat Edom Zoman different than every other case. So if we treat them different regarding warning, that we don't require warning, maybe we treat them different regarding lashes also. So how could you use that as a model for other cases? Dr. Navid, you hear that point or not?
Yes, that's why it's a different case.
That's why I can't.
Everyone else gets warning.
Everyone else gets warning. So therefore, Edom Zoman, you can't use that as to teach everything else when it seems to be the exception to the rule. So then the Gemara said, what did the Gemara shoot back? You don't tell me Edom Zoman is the exception to the rule. So you're telling me that the reason why there's lashes without an action is because it doesn't require a warning. Because the Gemara shot back, I have something else that does require a warning. Doesn't have that stringency doesn't have the stringency of not requiring a warning, and still gets lashes without an action. Motzi Shemra. Morning. Good to see you. So therefore, don't tell me it's that stringency that causes it. And then what would you say? You say, hey, you can't learn out from Motzi Shemra because Motzi Shemra has some other stringency. What's the other stringency Motzi Shemra had? It has two punishments. So maybe it's different. You can't learn from Motzi Shemra. So then the Gemara says, okay, each one has a stringency that the other one doesn't have. But there is one common denominator that they both have. What's the common denominator? That you did an inaction, they get lashes. So let's learn everything else from those two. So then the Gemara says, no, they have a common denominator that we can't use them as a source. What's their common denominator? They're a knas. And if they're a knas, then they're unusual. Something unusual you can't use for the usual run of the mill. Is that clear, that point, Dr. Navid? If I could show you, if I could put on the board that Edom Zoman and Motzi Shemra are knas, are fines, are penalties. And now you want to use that as a source, these two guys together, to teach everything else. But if I could think these two are a total exception to the normal rule, because these two have something in it that everything else doesn't have. What do they have? Knas. So therefore, I can't use them as a source for cases that are not knas. Because the Torah was extra strict by these guys regarding knas, So maybe that's why the Torah was extra strict regarding lashes without an action. Is that point clear or not?
Yes.
Morris, good? Good morning, Mr. Ashley. Good to see you. Mr. Ashley will still take you, you know that. Oh, have a great day. So that's what the Gemara said. So what is the Gemara? So the Gemara wants to say that the fact that they both have the aspect of Knas, therefore I can't use them as role as a teacher for cases that are not Knas. Mr. Haber, good? So the Gemara shoots back, you know what? You would be right if they're both cases of Knas. Rabbi Yehuda says Edom Zomim is not Knas. Rabbi Yehuda says Edom Zomim, we look at it like a monetary payment or a punishment, not as we don't identify as a Knas. Why don't we identify as a Knas? Because they get the punishment exactly what they wanted to do to the other guy. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda looks at it not as a Knas. So therefore, you can't say that they both have this common stringency of Knas. Not going to fit. Here's this next point. If I say Knas, if they both are cases of Knas, so then that is a common denominator. If it's true that Edom Zomim and Motzi Shemra are both Knas, so then you can't use them to teach other cases because they have some sort of stringency that the other case doesn't have. What is the stringency that they have? Knas, right? If they're both Knas, then they have a stringency that the other ones don't have. But that's if they're both Knas. Rabbi Yehuda says no, Edom Zomim is not Knas. If it's not Knas, so there's no, they both don't have that stringency of Knas. Correct? If you identify Edom Zomim as not Knas, the Edom Zomim is not a Knas. Moshe Shemra is Knas. So therefore, what is the common denominator in Moshe Shemra and Edom Zomim? Lashes without an action. That's therefore Rabbi Yehuda says also we're going to learn from there all over lashes without an action. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. That's what the Gemara says. Rabbi Yehuda does not agree with Rabbi Akiva. He holds Edom Zomim is not a Knas. And therefore, there's no common denominator of Knas between Edom Zomim and Motzi Shemra. And therefore, we could use them both together as a source to get lashes without an action. Because they both don't have a similar stringency. Okay? Not yet. We're getting close. So now the Gemara shoots back.
Why would Torah want to use two cases that are similar as not similar, to learn everything from? You're saying, okay, this has A, this has B. Now we're going to put A and B together, and we're going to do all the cases. Why not A, B, C, and D?
Because they try to, because it would be so much easier.
No, but why not have like 5 more other things? Then you could argue every case in order. Why A and B?
No, but this is
There's one of the 13 ways to turn into Reshes. This is the way the Torah gave. This is the way you could. Same way you have. Say Reshava, you have a word here. That the same word to teach you. Yeah, sometimes you have two psukim right next to each other. Hekish. There's also one where the two psukim are coming to tell us the same bottom line. Teaches us for all over. Meaning, there's a concept sometimes you couldn't learn from one direct. Because one has a certain stringency that the other one doesn't have. But if I find the bottom line is the same by two different cases.
So since both of them have a common denominator of lashes.
Without an action.
Without an action. And one is fine, one doesn't have fine.
So therefore,
learn something.
therefore we could, right. Therefore they are comparable for the rest of the Torah. That's what the Gemara says. Okay, and we'll continue tomorrow with the next step. This is, hopefully tomorrow we'll finish to the next Mishnah and we'll start a new sugya on. So we're on Dalet on the base. This is real heavy stuff. We're getting there. We're gonna get. This is the.
Well, it seems like so much discussion about something. the Gemara could tell us this is what it is and that's it. It's like such a back and forward between like all the sugiyot and
Right, because this is how they're trying to figure it out. They're trying to understand. They're trying to get to the truth and the bottom and where is the source. We're looking for the source, and we have to make sure that whatever we're going to answer is going to be no holes in it. That it's strong. You know what I'm saying? If there's a hole, then it's not a good source, and we got to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, give me a minute. Okay.
Have a great day, everyone. Nice to say hello to your son, Yosef. What's his
Good
name?
morning.
Good morning.
David.
Good morning. What's your name?
David.
David. Have a great day, David.
Bye.
Say thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a great
Bye.
day.
Bye. Oh, you're on.
How are you?
Bye, Akiva. Bye.
Have a good
Bye.
day. Yosef. Take care. Bye-bye.
So long, my friends.
Take care, Yosef. Take care,
Bye.
David. Bye-bye.